Kate Milafalcio. Welcome back to Irish Granny Tarot. We're continuing our Saturday book, and this is video number 19. Let me write it down to hold it up for the camera. 19. The real Marilyn. I know, this is like weightlifting in the gym here. It's so heavy. Okay, we're on chapter 52, the cover-up expands. So Monday, August 6th, the Fox Studio by Monday, the Fox Studio had Marilyn's dressing room completely cleared out, no trace of her left. Obviously, the implication is they're trying to erase all memory of her, and someone afraid there might be incriminating evidence, and they went through it all. The toxicology report was very brief. No alcohol in her system, and the barbiturates in her blood were 4.5%. No other toxicology results were done of any sort. This is really shocking, given the situation. I'm not going to go list the whole list of stuff, the bottles that were by her bedstand, but it's just an endless list. It's just utterly ridiculous. It would have been enough to kill an elephant, just incredible. Marilyn had not been able to find her Nebutol, and she asked Greenson, she called him up and asked him, what happened to it? It's gone. And mysteriously, it just showed back up empty on that night table after her death. So why was there an old bottle? The date on it was old, and it was from her old house, and it was empty. Why was that sitting there when she'd moved into a new house and had a much more recent prescription? It's weird. Almost looked like the bottles were planted to make her look like an addict. It's interesting. On Monday, August the 6th, the coroner created what they call, well, I don't want to use the word, but an S team to do a psychiatric autopsy, whatever that means. So this is a distraction from the idea of foul play. I mean, they're doing everything they can to plant this notion in people's heads. Curfrey predetermined how she died and wouldn't let the team explore anything else, and just tried to manufacture all the evidence to support that theory. The forensic samples and other evidence were destroyed immediately. Lawford put out a statement that said he was the last to speak to her. How did he know that? He was getting out ahead of the story and said that she didn't seem depressed. Rudin doubted that it was S in public, but said otherwise to the police in private. He claimed that he and Lawford and Greenson feared that this would happen. So why is he saying one thing one time, one thing another time, then saying he feared that it was a possibility, but oh no, it would never have happened? Contradictory. Lawford avoided the police for 13 years, but he did talk to the press. The story went from she wasn't depressed to maybe she was tired, to then she had slurred speech, to then saying goodbye, cruel world, to a lot of people. And this last story morphed, and it wasn't until really 1971 that it was fully fledged. So this is established as fact in the official narrative, but there is no evidence. It's embraced by a corrupt police chief years later to keep the public off the scent. That's quite true. Eunice first said she went to bed at 8. Later she said she went to bed at midnight. First she said she woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Later she said she woke up earlier. First she said she saw a light under the door. Then she said she noticed something because she saw the telephone cord under the door. Next she got no answer and called the doctor. Then she said there was music in the room. Then she saw Marilyn through the window, which was sealed shut with a blackout curtain. Then she called 2 doctors and, Engelberg too, and that they parted the curtain and with a poker and saw Marilyn. Marilyn once told somebody that I phone my friends constantly. The phone's by my bed day and night, and the cord was always running under the doorway. The phone was attached in the hall, but you know, it's the old days. The LA Times pushed the false narrative that she was depressed, that her body was locked in that room, and that she was unkempt, listless, had no interest in anything, mentioned she hadn't shaved her legs. Uh-oh, maybe I should worry. That she needed a manicure, but she'd just been gardening. Her home was sparsely furnished, which means she had no interest in living. Her home was sparsely furnished because the furniture was held up in Mexico, and she was constantly trying to get it to arrive. Eunice fed these lies. She claimed that Marilyn was depressed over being fired from Fox. But she knew Marilyn had a new contract and a new script and everything was good, and she had a whole bunch of other offers. This was a ploy. This was a lie, undeniably. Marilyn's comeback had not been made public, and Eunice took advantage of this, and so did Newcomb. Murray does seem to have been involved in some kind of weird cover-up. She didn't seem sad. She didn't seem upset. She was very chatty. She was living in the house. It was like the enemy within, spying on Marilyn. An AP reporter, James Bacon, told this crazy story. I don't remember what it was. A doctor, okay, this is the story that he's printed. It's not true. A doctor smashed his way into a locked bedroom and found Marilyn Monroe dead in bed, nude, a telephone clutched in her hand, an empty pill bottle nearby. He elaborated. Dr. Richard Greenson, her psychiatrist, said she called him at 5:15 Saturday distraught, seeking reassurance. They talked an hour. He told her to take a drive in her car to relax. It was a ride she never took. Instead, she retired at 8 p.m. ... Eunice claimed that a mysterious man called and said, you know, wake her up and make sure that she takes more of her sleeping pills. And this seemed really ridiculous. So her story is the man said, wake her up, wake Marilyn Monroe up, and that kind of disturbed the effect of the first dose. And then the suggestion was just take some more, and because she couldn't get back to sleep. Actually, that wasn't her problem. She didn't have any problem falling asleep. She had a problem staying asleep. That's a sign of trauma. But anyway, an LA detective disputed all of this fake news. He said there was no record of a mysterious call that a man called and woke her up. It didn't happen. Later, the police planted a story and a call from Joe Bolaños, the guy who escorted her to that event. He was a one-time escort that was arranged. He was not a date even. And they hadn't seen each other in weeks since that one event. So what's going on? I think what they're suggesting here is this is all smoke and mirrors, distraction from the fact that the AG was there. And it worked. Even the San Francisco Examiner called Marilyn and Bolaños lovers, that he broke her heart, which was complete nonsense. The press was being manipulated to say that she redosed herself after a phone call. There's no evidence of any of this. Toxicology showed such incredibly high levels in her blood that it absolutely could not have been accidental, and it wasn't oral. The doctor asked Marie to stay over on August 4th. This is the first time he ever asked her to do that. He knew that, he knew nothing about, Eunice knew nothing about Marilyn's sleep habits or what she wore, because she never stayed over while Marilyn went to bed at night. August 7th, Eunice was interviewed by the LA Times and said that Marilyn was complicated, moody, troubled, depressed, sad. And she did say she didn't have any alcohol. She said that Marilyn relaxed in a robe all day, which was a lie. People were in and out of that house and saw her. And she'd been gardening. She'd gone shopping with Eunice to the nursery. Eunice said she sparkled. She had good color. But after she got a call from Calneva, so all these people are saying she looked great. She seemed happy. She seemed doing well. But then this other woman, a neighbor, Jean Carmen, said she looked like death. And Earl Wilson used that same quote and said either she's drinking or something strange has happened to her. Interestingly, this description of her was about a one-time sighting on the weekend that she was in Calneva. That's what the Calneva thing was about. Remember how upset she was about that. So maybe, you know, momentarily she was distressed and she didn't look happy. But after that, she looked fine and she was doing well and she was busy and happy. So it's just how people can twist the truth. Jean Carmen put a lot of effort into lying about being Marilyn's best friend. She studied her. She appeared on many shows as the big Marilyn Monroe expert. Her story got weirder and weirder over time. She was referred to as a high-priced call girl and not the type that Marilyn would ever hang out with, and certainly not be her friend. She was not well known at all to Marilyn's close circle. She was not in Marilyn's phone book. And she claimed she was Marilyn's roommate at one point in her apartment, and that's absolutely not true. After her death, there was a deluge of stories that rewrote history and really, you know, destroyed the truth. They created a totally different public image of Marilyn. I mean, I believe what little I heard. I didn't know much about her, didn't follow it, but I just assumed she was dumb and ditzy and what had happened. So the book refers to a number of false stories and reports. There's lots of details. We won't go into them because we've gone into them all before. There's nothing brand new that we haven't talked about, but they're all lies. She wasn't a failed star. She hadn't gotten fat. She didn't have like delaying tactics to stay out of working for Fox, you know, calling in sick and everything like Elizabeth Taylor did. She had a virus, and it's documented. The doctor treated her. The studio doctor treated her for a virus. She wasn't going downhill. Her career was doing really well, and she was not at the end of any rope. She was full of plans for gardens and furniture and book that she was doing. Her production company was not a failure. They had put out Bus Stop and The Prince and the Showgirl, which were both did well. Also, it's said that the creation of Marilyn Monroe Productions helped to end the studio star system. It was a very important business venture. Lots of these lies came from reporters who earlier had praised her as glamorous, that she created a stir and an air of excitement, that maturity had enhanced her beauty, that she had a penetrating mind, that she had wit and wisdom. And then why did one guy write, Vernon Swift wrote terrible stories about her, and he was behind a lot of the smears. The AP's Bob Thomas also wrote a lot of bad stuff about her, like she was in seclusion for weeks. This is entirely false, and there's a ton of eyewitness reports that it's false. What have I got on me here? Something stuck to my sweater. Weinstein said that Marilyn was mentally sick and incapable, not responsible for her actions. Yeah, that's baloney. Syndicated columnist Sheila Graham wrote one of the most noxious articles, headlined "Fears of Insanity, Facing the Camera Seen as Causes of Death of Actress." She said that Weinstein strongly expressed the opinion that she was sick and not responsible for her actions, that she was incapable. Intimates were surprised by the studio's reactivating that movie, with Dean Martin with the mentally sick actress. She had a great fear of facing the camera, which she realized she would soon have to do again. And that could have driven her to desperate measures. But, okay, that's nuts. But there's a film of Something's Got to Give. Like, what they had filmed so far, it wasn't the put together movie, but it was the stuff they had filmed so far. And everyone who saw it, in the projection room, said that she was absolutely brilliant. That, and she'd been rehired. Even Dr. Joyce Brothers did an unprofessional hit piece about her. It's very sad. So now we're at chapter 53, the locked bedroom door that was not lockable. Why make such an issue of the door being locked? And this would have been to guarantee that Dr. Greenson and Murray were not in the room when she died, is basically what they're getting at. Greenson later claimed the room was locked and bolted. Well, the truth was, and her secretary confirms this, that there isn't one door in this house that locks. That she was frustrated because she had nowhere to lock up important documents, and she complained about it to a number of people. Her bedroom did not lock. After Marilyn's death, her business manager had to arrange to have locks installed. The people who bought and lived in her house right after she died said there are no locks on any of the 3-bedroom doors. There are decorative keyholes, but they don't function. Dr. Greenson and Eunice lied, and the cops didn't even bother to check it. That would be so simple to check. Ralph Roberts confirms, no locks. Friends said that after paying Whitney, Marilyn had, that was where she was locked in the mental hospital, that Marilyn had a dislike of being locked in, or it would make her feel like the walls were closing in on her. Newcomb confirmed she did not lock doors. For over 13 years, multiple times, Eunice said that the door was locked, but after Greenson died in 1979, she confessed several times the door was not locked. Greenson was at the house. He didn't correct the media error that he had just phoned. He allowed people to think that, but he was at the house. He claimed he came early in the day and left at 1 o'clock when Murray took Marilyn to the beach. This would erase the AG's afternoon visit. This would exclude that whole story. The only confirmation of this is from a guy who was a big family friend of the family from outside Boston. Greenson was careless, and he carelessly confirmed that he was at Marilyn's house in the late afternoon in a letter that he wrote to Dr. Chris in late August of 1962. So he kind of ratted on himself, so he was there prior to her death, and he kept that timing quiet. There's a police report that Greenson was called to come in by Marilyn at 5 o'clock on Saturday, and he did. His daughter knew that he checked at the time, and the daughter knew that Greenson said he checked when he went later in the day on Saturday, and there were no pill bottles on the nightstand in her room. Therefore, if we believe the official story, after Dr. Greenson left, Marilyn went around the house, gathered as many old pill bottles as she could without Murray seeing anything, took them into the room, and put them all onto this tiny nightstand, and removed pills from 2 of the bottles and then recapped them. Or the crime scene was tampered with. Why all the other pill bottles? It was why the first cop thought the scene was staged. It seems like they tried to make it seem like she took all these pills, and that didn't happen. Murray tried to say that Marilyn kept a ton of drugs by the bed, but these were old prescriptions, and she just didn't. Ralph Roberts says no, that he was in there all the time. He never saw any. If she was such a concern for, what they say happened to her. Why would all those people just let her keep all those drugs around? It just does seem really against logic. Dorothy Kilgallen got a ton of mail urging her to continue investigating because there's so many inconsistencies in these stories. Bob Considine from Hearst in August of 62 posed a number of very important questions. Why did they delay calling the cops? Who was she talking to on the phone that it's such a big secret? Why would she do this when she seemed carefree and happy and everything? Well, that could be a debatable point. There's reason to say sometimes this is an impulsive decision made suddenly, and you may not seem like that's the direction you're going in earlier in the day, but there's so much other evidence that is against it. Who was involved with her in broken romances? Well, I think we know that answer. Why did the coroner organize this psychological autopsy team? Why was there no note? She's a dramatic person. She was an actress. She would have done this for some huge drama, but not leave any kind of a note. She was emotional, and she was a writer, and she was an emotional writer, and she wrote a lot when she was emotionally upset, and yet no note. In response to this article on the same day, Los Angeles closed the case because it was an invasion of privacy of the witnesses. Okay. It seems that Walter Winchell knew something. He needled the brothers. He needled the older brother about his wife in Italy, and he implied suffocation in a rage by, the other brother. I don't want to say too much. William Bostock recently commented publicly, "I know all about the murder since I worked at the Associated Press at Rockefeller Plaza from 58 to 63. All the reporters in the newsroom and the columnists and the Pulitzer Prize winner Hal Boyle knew all the details of what happened out in LA in that house, Marilyn's house. It was a simple murder. They just went in there on a visit, murdered her, and casually left. Winchell and Hal Boyle and Dorothy Kilgallen knew everything the day after it happened, and that was on a Sunday. These journalists went so far as they felt it was safe to go in dropping hints to the public that her death was not what it appeared to be." Winchell was close to Hoover and DiMaggio, and he attended Marilyn's funeral. In August of 62, the FBI's surveillance saw two guys climb into Judith Campbell's apartment. They called it into the FBI, and they were told, "Don't call the cops." So the FBI surveillance team saw these two guys break into her apartment. They called their office. The office said, "Don't tell the police." Later, the FBI discovered that burglars were working for defense contractors to get dirt on the older brother. They wanted to force getting a contract, and they stole phone records, and they did not steal valuable jewelry. Isn't that interesting? And it worked because despite an inferior design, General Dynamics got the F-111 contract and not Boeing, which actually may have worked out in their favor, I'm just saying. And this contract, even though they weren't suited to have it, they did get it after this break-in, but it got canceled after the assassination. Campbell loved this older brother and got coerced into being a courier for him with Sam Giancana. She didn't know who he was because he had an alias that he went by when he dealt with her. He called himself Sam Flood. In 1999, the FBI files on her showed inaccuracies and a campaign of harassment. They were shocking campaign of harassment. They broke into my apartment, she said. A memo details it. Returning from lunch, she confronted two agents in her living room. Another pair turned up in her hospital room as she was recovering from gynecological surgery, and they accused her of having an abortion. On one occasion, 2 agents visited her mother and showed her pictures that were embarrassing. The agents followed her and taunted her openly on the street. The irony was the gangsters protected her from the G-men. They treated her like a lady, and the FBI treated her like a tramp, she said. The same campaign happened to Marilyn Monroe. Her stand-in told Barbara Eden, the actress, you know, I Dream of Jeannie. Her stand-in was called Evelyn Moriarty. Barbara Eden says in the months preceding her death, Moriarty confided in her that the actress had told her that she was being followed night and day. Her phone was being tapped. There were even death threats. After Marilyn died, Barbara says Evelyn Moriarty called her and sobbed. She was so frightened. Moriarty said. The stand-in said Marilyn was so frightened. The hang-up calls, the man in the green Mercedes following her all the time. She knew who was behind it all and why. She told me so, and now they're saying she killed herself. She would have never have done that. Never, never, never. Barbara Eden concluded, I have no doubt whatsoever that Evie was right on all counts. Before she died, Judith Campbell did a reassessment of the older brother's presidency. It was his character that she came to doubt. Something bred in the bone. She reflected that the old guy, the father, really set the pace for the boys. I used to say that they were morally bankrupt, and I still feel that way. It's a rather harsh judgment, but it's what I came to realize. No one wants to accept it, but there was a very cold inner core to the older brother. He did what was right for himself, and everybody let him do what was right for him, whatever he wanted. I don't believe he should have been president due to his conduct. It's flaunting who you are and the power, and I think he did abuse the power. I mean, you either set the standards and live by them yourself, or you have no business being in the White House. This is all too ironic. Indeed, their collusion with the mob in the 60s election was the original sin that wouldn't go away, that shadowed the entire administration, and would have kept doing so, but beholden to gangsters and powerful corporate entities and trying to keep it all quiet was just too much. Jane Mansfield was scared after Marilyn's death because she had been involved with him too, the older brother. Maybe I'll be next, she said. Maybe I should go to Europe for a while. She was introduced to him by Peter Lawford, better known as his pimp, somebody said. Later, he told Jane, you never, so he was kind of reassuring Jane that she was safe. He said, you, Jane, never pressured him. That's why Marilyn died. But that wasn't in her character. It wasn't true. She had nothing to pressure him for. She was too afraid to turn him down for a tryst, turning the AG down for a tryst in 1963. Jane Russell feared the AG and believed that Marilyn was killed. She felt an implicit threat. So Jane Mansfield, Jane Russell, you see a pattern going on here. Chapter 54, Marilyn's final curtain. Bernice, her sister, came out for the funeral, and she didn't have enough money for her husband to fly with her. Marilyn often downplayed her sister in the media, not because they weren't close, but to protect her privacy. They were very close. They met at the cemetery. They met Joe DiMaggio there, and he said to them, Marilyn seemed all right when they talked. I was planning to see her on Monday. It seems that Marilyn may have been dodging his calls, so, his version of what was going on may have been a little different from reality, too. Inez Nelson invited Bernice to stay with her, but Bernice got her taping their conversation. Who is not taping everybody? She said, I was upset and fearful. I stayed because I was too overwhelmed by everything to confront Inez, but she didn't want to stay with her. Marilyn didn't want a funeral, but there was one. This is sad. Whitey, her good friend Whitey, did her makeup. He'd once promised her that he would. So sad. She'd been concerned that her corpse should look good. And he said it's not very likely that you die in a state of dishevelment, and she was found in one. Sidney Guilleroff was asked to do her hair, and when he showed up, he fainted. So he couldn't cope with it, so he made a wig. He prepared a wig for her. Fox assisted at the funeral home by setting up privacy curtains and providing security. Only 35 people were invited. Joe DiMaggio told security, keep Sinatra and the Lawfords out. Eunice Murray said her best friends should be invited. DiMaggio said, if it hadn't been for some of her friends, she wouldn't be where she is. Bernice phoned random minister for support. She said, I'm hesitant about staying alone. I don't know anybody here. DiMaggio sat with the coffin very late into the night at the mortuary, and then he came at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the service wasn't until 1, but he sat there the whole time. He was utterly inconsolable. The only guests were Bernice, the Strasburgs, Whitey, Agnes Flanagan, Mickey Reardon, the chauffeur and the maid, her old foster parents, the Kennekamps, May Reese, I believe that was her former sister-in-law, Ralph Roberts, Inez and Pat Milken, and the family of Grace Goddard, her mother. Greenson and his wife and 2 children came, Pat Newcomb and Eunice. Engelberg never showed up. His behavior was really odd. Norman Jeffries later reflected that among those who were allowed to attend were accomplices to her murder or cover-up. Jeffries confirmed that some of the key witnesses led secret lives and had hidden agendas. Arthur Miller did not go because his wife was 9 months pregnant with their first child, but he sent flowers. And he sent flowers from him, not only himself, but from his children, whom Marilyn loved. And she loved her stepchildren very much. Miller said, most of those people at the funeral, they destroyed her. It was a non-denominational service. Lee Strasberg gave the eulogy. DiMaggio kissed her and said, I love you 3 times. Fox provided 10 Pinkerton cops, 40 Los Angeles cops, and 40 studio cops. There was a crowd of 1,000 spectators. Whitey and Sidney were among the pallbearers. And he believed her, when she called him, he believed that she was scared and was afraid of the AG. Inez made a really Inez, it's Inez, it's a Spanish name, but in this time period, I had a patient, a good friend, a neighbor whose name was Inez, is how she pronounced it. I know it's Inez, but you know. There was a nasty comment made to Bernice that Pat Newsom and I would have walked with you into the room, you know, but you really hurt us for not inviting us to do that at the funeral. After the mourners left the area of the funeral, all the flowers were attacked by a mob of fans who were completely out of control. Marilyn had once asked Joe, and he did, have red roses sent 3 times a week to her grave for the next 20 years. I don't know. I think it's unusual. She's talking with people about how she wants her hair when she's dead and how she wants her makeup when she's dead and flowers she wants left for her. I just think that's odd. Anyway, the book has pictures of the AG and his wife and children fishing and grinning like fools on the day of the funeral. Forget about it. I won't show you. Was there some relief there that she was dead? The secrets would be buried with her? In the paper, there were more stories about the hunt for Jose Bolaños, who was a CIA asset, and claims that he and Marilyn were planning to marry, but his mother said, no such thing. This is just a distraction. I don't know what he's talking about. Next day, Bernice met with the lawyer Rudin and Frosch at about Marilyn's estate. She remembered Marilyn saying that she wanted to change her will and had been very upset about her will and about the people that she had left money to, and she wanted to change that. She was supposed to be doing that week. 2 weeks later, okay, so 2 weeks later, the will came out, and I'm not going to read you all of the bequests, but most of it went to, there was $10,000 to her sister, $10,000 to May Reese, her personal secretary. A couple of people got $5,000, and then all of her clothes and belongings went to Lee Strasberg to distribute amongst her friends and colleagues, to whom I am devoted. But he locked most of it away and deprived others of sharing in her memorabilia, her worldly possessions. And eventually, they increased dramatically in value and generated a multi-million-dollar fortune for his second wife he married after Paula died. $100,000 was held in trust for her mother. Let's see. The balance was to go to her psychiatrist, Marion Chris, to be used for psychiatric research. The residuary was to be divided between her personal secretary and Marion Chris. Frosch was named as executor. So Strasberg died in 1982, leaving his 75% interest to his new wife, who was 38 years younger than he. And that lasted until 2001, when a New York surrogate court finally declared the estate completely settled and authorized the transfer of the remaining assets to her company that was managed by Anna Strasberg, the second wife of Lee Strasberg. So Lee's surviving spouse made $20 to $30 million from selling Marilyn's property to the company Authentic Brands. It was all bought as the estate of Marilyn, and it went on to sell. That company gave the second wife up to $30 million and turned around and sold all that stuff again on the open market and got $80 million. Inez, Bernice, and Sherry, the secretary, went through the house and all her stuff. Inez burned tons of paper, letters, notes, articles, etc., which is reprehensible. She destroyed her history. She took a filing cabinet home and bought a second one that was being sold at auction. She bought it anonymously and kept both till her death in 1986. Inside were 5,000 documents. She left them to her sister-in-law, and her sister-in-law left them to her son. The Strasbergs sued, and they got them as what was considered legally part of her estate. What happened to the Red Diary? We don't know. Bernice went back to Florida and was harassed by fans. An investigative reporter, Floribel Muir, we've heard of her before, stirred up a hornet's nest with a column that she wrote. The secrets of why Marilyn Monroe died is likely to be entombed with her. The coroner's team today went ahead with its investigation, but authorities concede the facts may be never known. The police dropped the case. The slow action of investigating officials won't even say what really killed her. The coroner, when asked about the delay, said, "We're handling this as a routine case." But reports on causes of death in routine cases are usually issued within 24 hours. And then there was all sorts of ridiculous speculation. For example, one completely false bit of reporting was August 11th of 1962, when the Chicago Tribune said cyanide was suspected. Chapter 55, Strange Pressures Applied to the LA Officials. Muir, in her column, alleged the coroner failed to reveal the full toxicology because of strange pressures. Phone records, secret pressures, mysterious pressures from persons closely in touch with Marilyn in the last few weeks of her life. This is all being talked about in columns she wrote. She pointed out that the coroner never released her stomach contents, and then she drew attention to the fact of external pressure causing failure to the investigation. A lot of this is just implications and assertions. Also, the phone records were never released, and Muir was known for her courage, intuition, and fine reporting. She had fine reporting sensibilities. She was tough. She fought, was ruthless. She pulled no punches. She had left a long trail of journalistic victories. She kept making these allegations, and there's no proof, but there's no proof not either. And she started to push for, why is there being a cover-up? This is, she started to actually say there was a cover-up. May Mann, whose column was syndicated in over 400 papers across the country, was a Hollywood reporter and one of Marilyn Monroe's favorites. She would give her exclusives. She raised doubts and got a call from the LA police chief, Parker, about her columns and said it would be bad for my health if I keep writing stories like that. So this corrupt cop was guilty of threatening a female reporter. Columnist Earl Wilson wrote that in the aftermath of Monroe's death, a high-ranking appointed public official was running back to his wife. I'm not sure what that means. Walter Winchell hinted at Marilyn and mob fixer Korshak meeting, but no reporters' clues were ever investigated. None of these allegations was ever investigated. Lawfords, the Newcomb, and Murray all left town. Murray went to Europe 6 or 7 times after this, and yet claimed she was impoverished. Newcomb hung with the family from outside Boston at their compound, and then went to Europe for months. On her return, the AG got her a job at the U.S. Information Agency close to him, and she did not fill out an application for the job. She was hired in May, and she didn't fill out an application for hire until October, yet this job required really serious security clearances. So when asked years later if the AG sent her out of the country, she said, well, I was leaving anyway. 3 days after Marilyn's funeral, Newcomb was in Hyannisport as the guest of the older brother while the wife's away in Italy fooling around. So soon after a big display of hysteria at Marilyn's house, she's got a picture taken of her with a big gigantic grin on her face in a boat. She got fired by Jacobs, by the way, publicist. She was able to avoid the press, and she was able to avoid the police and questioning by being at the compound. She was still with him and the Lawfords week later in Santa Monica, back to LA in Santa Monica. The coroner did not release the facts of the fact that there was no evidence of pill residue and no proof of oral intake. Delays were ongoing about results coming out about anything, and the question is, was this a strategy? Toxicology reports did not include the kidneys or the intestines, which is where you would look for chloral hydrate and Nembutal. Dorothy Kilgallen was on the trail of the truth. She wrote an article, The Mystery Deepens in Marilyn's Death. It was censored by some papers. The omitted references to Lawford and the mysterious caller. Kilgallen questioned the testimony at the psychiatric inquest. She called it a joke. And she said, we need facts, not theories. Any good cop would be able to get a picture of what really went on, she implied. The last person to talk was not telling the truth. She says, I think we know who that is. Well, she meant Lawford. She implied that Paula Strasberg had the diary and asked, what will she do with it? And that was really the big concern, wasn't it? Kilgallen tried to scare those involved that someone else, like Paula, had secrets to reveal. And this proves that somebody was worried about that diary being made public. James Haspiel, who became very close to the Strasberg, said, quote, I'll tell you this, Paula never ever said to me that she was writing a diary, never. I cannot believe that she would have mentioned it, but something that Paula said to me is memorable. She said, I will have to write the definitive biography. I never forgot that. Quite a few books about Marilyn were written by people who knew Marilyn but never got published because they weren't considered worthy of publishing. August 15th, the Chicago Sun-Times called the CIA headquarters and made a connection between Giancana and the CIA and the anti-Castro Cubans because of gambling interests. Did the mafia did the mafia plant this story with this reporter? So was he put onto it by the mob because Marilyn was now not a threat and they wanted to get to the brothers? There's just so much Machiavellian maneuvering here. I can't even keep track who's mad at who at what time. Chapter 56, Why It Had to Be Murder. More about the autopsy. The liver Nembutal level had to accumulate while still alive. No more Nembutal would go into the liver once you were dead. So however much was in your liver at autopsy was put in there while you were alive. And there was way more in her liver than would be normal for a normal dose. How did that get into her system? Well, it could have been slipped to her on the last afternoon. One possibility is the guy with the black bag in the early afternoon who went with the AG. He was seen by several neighbors. This is not an imaginary guy. He really did go in there. Who was that? Was that Engelberg? Was the intent to give her some in the afternoon and build it up later, gradually, knowing she would take more that night as a normal dose and then not realizing that she'd been given too much already? So she should have had access to a maximum of about 13 to 18 pills, but the level in her blood indicated it would have been, if oral, 40 to 50 pills. Where did that come from? The chloral hydrate level in her blood indicated 17 pills, but she had a bottle with 10 left. The prescription meant that she would not have had 17 pills to ingest and then have 10 left. And if it was intentional, why would she have left any? Therefore, based on the toxicology, they claim that she must have ingested 64 pills. But she didn't have anywhere near that many available to her, and there were none in her stomach. Noguchi and Kerfree both misstated the number of pills in her prescription. They both kept saying 50, 50, 50. It was half that, 25. The toxicologist in the police inventory confirms that the number was 25 and that the prescription had been filled a couple of days earlier, so there probably weren't 25 pills in the bottle that day to take. Certainly not the amount she had in her system. There was no chloral hydrate in her liver, which means she died before it could be absorbed by the liver. This indicates that she was given it in some way other than orally. It was in her blood, but it never got to her liver, and that means it wasn't, because of the route of the way the drugs are absorbed by the body. If it went in her mouth, it would have gone to her liver. But there was none in her liver, it was in her blood. Therefore, it did not go in her mouth. Okay. By needle or otherwise, like, I don't know, an enema, it would go directly into her blood, bypass her digestive tract, including her stomach and liver. The report says that if she OD'd, she died quickly from rapid absorption into the blood through IV, IM, that would be injection, intramuscular, or enema, not oral. This is the report. Also, oral intake affects a person before 100% of the pills can be absorbed. And to cause such a high level, it's crazy. Her blood had 4 times the lethal amount, but they never figured out where all this came from and how it got into her body. Where did it get into the house? And then where did it get into her body? They never even pursued it. Her kidneys were drug-free, so it was not in her digestive tract. The kidneys are where unused portions of an oral med would end up. There are no drugs in her kidneys. It wasn't oral. If she decided to take all the Nembutal and all but 10 of her chloral hydrate, she would have died before the entire amount had completely digested in her stomach. I mean, that's just fact. And there should have been a lot of drugs found in her digestive system, and none was. The petechia that Noguchi found in her digestive tract are misleading. It's because of regular ingestion, regular irritation from sleeping meals over time. They'll do that. Normal doses over time will do that, cause little tiny blood vessels to break. And it didn't indicate a huge dose that had caused bleeding. So his making a big deal out of that proves nothing. Also, her colon. I can't believe I'm talking about Marilyn Monroe's colon. It seems strange. Her colon was had marked congestion and purplish discoloration. Discoloration. I think I'm getting tired. Discoloration. Noguchi never explained what that implied, but it could be the smoking gun of the case, as it bolsters the theory that she received a drug-laced enema. That would be the most likely explanation. Also, Nembutal is very acidic, and it would have been an irritant. It's a very undignified death, Discoloration of the colon argues against a suppository and is contradictory to OD. Interestingly, drug-laced enemas were popular at the time. It's kind of a poor choice of words, but it wasn't unusual in espionage groups, including the CIA and the mafia. This was sort of a choice for them. This would have been a clever choice of murder because of her drug use. The reputation, that the rumors that circulated about her, this would have not been necessarily causing raised eyebrows. In the enema, it would work faster and more drug would reach your circulation quickly, and there'd be no loss through vomiting. It could take a third of the time, less than an hour, to affect her than oral medication. It was faster and way more efficient. It's plausible that she administered her own Fleet's enema, but it had been doctored, and she did it in the cottage to be near a bathroom with running water. She was unaware the enema had been tampered with, and it had deadly amounts of Nembutal dissolved in it by somebody opening capsules and emptying them. The bottle was opaque. They wouldn't have been able to see the color. And as the drug was slowly absorbed, the tissue of the large intestine reacted to the trauma of exposure by an inflammatory response. It must be concluded from the medical evidence alone, said Assistant District Attorney John Minor, that she was killed by persons unknown. Assistant District Attorney said that. Use of the enema could explain why Eunice was washing sheets at 4 o'clock in the morning. Kind of gross, but The coup de grace on this whole subject is that when Deborah Gould, Peter Lawford's third wife, asked him how Marilyn Monroe died, he remarked that she took her last big enema. If true, this would prove that the actress was either murdered or the victim of negligent homicide, and the AG as well as Lawford knew who was responsible and helped cover it up. No one ever legitimized the prescriptions, The pharmacy received the orders by phone. Nobody knew for sure who it was. Engelberg was shocked by the number of pill bottles in the house and said that he didn't prescribe them. The number of prescriptions rose sharply after June of 62, but her mood, behavior, her energy, and appearance belie the theory that she was drug-addled. She simply wasn't. Dr. Stephen Karsh, a well-regarded forensic pathologist, has been quoted as saying the major holes in toxicology report make it virtually impossible to determine who or what killed her. He said, "I'm bothered by some of the inconsistency in the reports. I am particularly bothered by where the medicines came from. I don't know that they were hers. I don't know when they were taken, and I don't know what was in her body when she died, because the toxicology is incomplete." So he's got this absolutely golden reputation as a pathologist, and he actually wrote the textbook, and he believes the first investigators to arrive at her house were too quick to make assumptions. Engelberg lied on television. He said the liver had a lot of chloral hydrate in it. It had none. He said that there was Seconal by the bed, and there was none. He said a prescription was phoned in for Seconal in his name. He said he lied so much about her mental state of behavior, about her pills, about the toxicology. He either lied about the prescriptions or someone ordered them with his name under false pretenses. He said that the only sleeping pill that he prescribed her was Nembutal, but the phone call prescription with his name, this is from Dr. Engelberg, was for chloral hydrate. None of this was investigated. The next day, he wrote out a prescription for her for Librium after this Seconal was called in, and this was in his writing with his name. Ralph Roberts used to pick up her prescriptions. He said he knew that 2 years earlier, Greenson had written a chloral hydrate prescription. If Engelberg is telling the truth, then Greenson lied about the doctors coordinating their prescriptions. Greenson also claimed that he never gave Marilyn any drugs. Engelberg did it all. There was enough Nembutal in her system to kill her, and Engelberg admitted that he prescribed it, so why would he lie about chloral hydrate? Somebody ordered the chloral hydrate. He wrote a prescription for Dexedrine in July. On the 1st and July the 10th, there were 4 phone calls for prescriptions in his name. Valmid, Seconal, Tuinal, and Librium, and no proof she ever got any of it. A note at the pharmacy was there to deliver it to her, which was unusual because she or another person always picked up her prescriptions. Why would any doctor prescribe 3 different kinds of sleeping pills all at the same time? A pharmacy would have questioned this. This is unusual, it's too much, and they would have questioned it. Years later, Dr. Greenson's wife said that he gave Marilyn chloral hydrate to wean her off barbiturates. Marilyn complained that they were too mild, and she got a prescription for Nembutal, according to Murray. She asked Engelberg for it. If so, she was taking chloral hydrate and Nembutal. Why didn't she OD earlier if she was taking them both at the same time? Chloral hydrate and other sedative accidentally taken together are what killed Anna Nicole Smith. Chloral hydrate is like a Mickey Finn. It's kind of like the OG date rape drug. They would give a Mickey Finn, they'd slip it in a drink, and the person would be robbed and not remember. Noguchi was under pressure to conclude the inquiry. He knew he had to reach the conclusion that others wanted or lose his job. Either his reasoning skills were flawed or he took the easy way out, the politically palpable conclusion. Later, he said, although the public was made aware, he said, I found absolutely no visual evidence of pills. The public did not know this. I found no evidence of pills in the stomach or intestine, no residue, no refractile crystals, and yet the evidence in the pill bottles show that Monroe swallowed 40 to 50 Nembutals and a large number of chloral hydrate pills. Well, it didn't show she swallowed it. It showed they were missing. So let's be accurate here. No one ever checked and verified the locked door theory. It could not be locked. Murray verified that. And he concluded that there was no injection because they didn't find a needle mark. He claimed they went over her with a magnifying glass, and pathologists who've been asked about this agree that it'd be easily missed even with the magnifying glass. John Belushi shot up 5 times before his death. They never found any needle marks at all. The toxicology tests that he requested that would show how the drugs got into her were never done, and no one was held accountable. Samples were misplaced or disposed of because we had closed the case. This is reckless, irresponsible, and criminal. Also, colored slides were missing. Photos were missing. There was a destruction of evidence, and Noguchi complained to the LA Times. There's a photo of all the doctors. It's kind of obnoxious, all these old guys pontificating in the paper. An interesting fact was the variety of the kinds of tests that should have been done and what was missing. It was a huge variety. They would have gone to different departments: histology, toxicology, microbiology. They would have gone to all these different departments, urology, hematology. So they would have been scattered all over the lab. They would have been preserved differently in different dishes and test tubes. It wasn't just one sample that disappeared. It was a slew of specimens. They all disappeared. This is the deliberate destruction of evidence. And Cyril Wecht says, I've discussed it and reviewed it with Dr. Noguchi. While it's true that those postmortem materials, fluids and tissues were destroyed, it's hard to understand how it could have happened in a negligent, innocent fashion. I concur with you on that, and I'd like to know what the hell this was about, and Dr. Noguchi never got an explanation from the toxicologist. And this is where we will end for this weekend, and we're coming very closely to the end of this very sad story. Thank you for watching. I'm kind of in a hurry to say goodbye because I'm running out of storage space, and it's going to end any second here. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for the last, I think next weekend will be the last videos, and then we will have a conversation, I'm hoping shortly thereafter or right on the heels of next weekend, with Larry Jordan. I'm really looking forward to it, and I have about 50 pages of questions for him, so it should be pretty fun. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of the weekend. Check out my Substack. Some of it is not behind the paywall if you just want to be entertained. I have plenty of snark and opinions. Behind the paywall, I have what I always did with Nate, with Deborah, all kinds of stuff going on back there. And Slán go fóill, sláinte.